The sun hung mercilessly over the dusty clearing as people gathered around the crude wooden stage that served as an auction block. This was no ordinary sale of horses, tools, or land deeds. This was the sale of human beings. A mix of settlers, ranchers, wanderers, and opportunists crowded together, each with their own reasons for attending. Some were searching for cheap labor, others for trouble, and a few for something darker. In the center of this chaotic market stood a girl who refused to bow her head. Even with her wrists bound in front of her dot, she was young, perhaps 17. Perhaps 18, with long black hair braided tightly down her back and eyes sharp with fury and defiance. Her name, whispered among the traders who brought her in, was Nayeli, a name that meant "I love you" in her tongue, though she felt little love in this moment. Her tribe had been scattered in a recent raid, and in the chaos she had been captured by opportunistic men who believed they could profit off her youth and her beauty. They dragged her across miles of harsh terrain to the settlement, knowing buyers would pay a few coins for a wild, stubborn girl who could work, cook, or fetch water. Something to be owned, but Nayeli was nobody's property. Even with dust on her cheek and bruises on her arms, she held herself tall. Her chin lifted, her gaze unwavering. She glared at the crowd not with fear, but with a promise, one that could cut deeper than any blade. The auctioneer, a large man with a booming voice and a thick mustache, smacked his hand against the wooden post. "All right, folks, next up we got a fine, strong young woman. Quick on her feet, sharp as a hawk, healthy as they come. Who'll start the bidding?" Silence stretched for a moment. Men studied her, some with greed in their eyes, others with pity. A handful avoided looking at her at all. Nayel, I broke the silence first. Her voice cut through the air like a whip. "I will not obey. You'll regret this, every one of you." A few men chuckled. One spat in the dirt. Another muttered, "Fiery one, ain't she?" The auctioneer laughed as though she had just told a joke. But irritation flickered in his eyes. Defiance made merchandise harder to sell. Among the crowd stood Elias Turner, a cowboy who had come to the auction for something far simpler. He needed new tools, a spare saddle, maybe an extra pair of boots. He had not come to buy a person. Never in his life had he expected to see something like this taking place so openly. Still, he stood and watched, his hat low over his brow, his jaw tense. Elias was a quiet man, the sort who never spoke unless it mattered. He had lived alone on his ranch for years, working the land, tending cattle, and keeping to himself. His reputation was one of calm strength. He was a man who preferred peace but was dangerous if forced to fight. When Nayeli raised her chin and shouted, he felt something shift inside him, an almost physical reaction. Not attraction, not pity. Something deeper. Recognition, maybe, admiration, respect for a spirit that refused to break. The auctioneer tried again. "Who'll give me $1? $1 for the girl?" The silence grew heavier. Many men were reluctant to buy someone so openly rebellious. A girl who threatened them at the very start was a headache waiting to happen. "Fine," the auctioneer grunted. 50 cents then. Still no takers. The man wiped sweat from his brow. "All right, 2 bits, just 25 cents. "She's worth more than that, damn it." From the back of the crowd came a lazy drawl. "I'll give you $2 for her." Heads turned. Elias stepped forward, coin pouch in hand. The price was shockingly high, almost outrageous for a girl no one seemed to want. But he didn't care. Money could be earned again. A soul couldn't. The auctioneer blinked, surprised, then grinned with greed at the unexpected profit. "Sold to the cowboy in the hat." Nayeli's eyes snapped toward Elias. She glared with such intensity it almost made the air crackle. "You'll regret this," she said again, her voice low but steady. "I will not obey you. Not now. Not ever. Elias didn't respond immediately. He stood still, letting her anger crash over him like a wave. He didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He didn't try to intimidate her like so many others would have. Finally, he said quietly, "Good. I'm not buying you to obey me." Those words struck the crowd like thunder. Even Nayeli paused, confusion flickering in her expression. Elias stepped closer, his tone calm and even. "You're coming with me because you deserve to be safe. That's all." The traders who had captured her looked irritated. They had hoped to squeeze more out of her new owner, but the coins were already in their hands. The sale was done. They cut the bindings around her wrists and shoved her forward. She stumbled but caught herself before she fell, refusing to show weakness. Elias didn't touch her. He simply stepped aside to give her space. "You can ride or walk," he said. "Your choice." Nayeli narrowed her eyes suspiciously, waiting for the trick. Waiting for the command. Waiting for the cruelty she had always known from men who tried to control her, but the cruelty never came. She followed him at a distance. Not because he owned her, she rejected that idea entirely, but because he was the only path away from the auction block. And she would rather face a rattlesnake alone than stay there another minute. As they walked toward his horse, the murmurs from the crowd faded behind them. The sun beat down. Dust rose with each step, and though Nayeli still swore silently that she would not obey this man, a tiny spark of curiosity flickered inside her. Why would a man spend $2, a week's wages for many, on someone he never intended to command? And what kind of cowboy bought a girl just to set her free? The ride to Elias Turner's ranch was long, hot, and strangely silent. The wind tugged at the loose strands of Nayeli's black hair as the horse carried them across open prairie, its hooves drumming a steady beat into the earth. She refused to ride behind him. Instead, she walked for the first hour, her chin high, her eyes never leaving the horizon. Elias said nothing. He simply let her choose her own pace. After a while, however, she began to limp, the rough ground cutting at her bare feet. Elias finally slowed his horse, letting it stop beside her. "You can walk if you want," he said quietly, "but you're hurt." "I don't need your concern," she snapped. Her pride was a shield, stubborn, heavy, and unbroken. Elias nodded. "All right." He didn't argue, didn't demand, didn't threaten. That alone confused her. When her limp grew worse, she suddenly stepped forward and seized the reins of his horse. Without warning or asking, she swung herself up into the saddle. Elias didn't stop her, didn't scold her. He simply mounted behind her, keeping his hands respectfully on the reins, not on her. The horse shifted under their combined weight, and they moved forward in silence again. But Nayeli felt it, his calmness, his restraint. It tugged at her thoughts like a whisper she didn't want to hear. By the time they reached his ranch, the sun was bleeding into the horizon, painting everything in shades of red and gold. The land stretched wide, quiet, isolated, open. A wooden cabin sat near a patch of fenced pasture, and smoke curled lazily from its chimney. Chickens pecked at the dust. A water barrel stood beside the porch. Horses grazed peacefully in the distance. It smelled of cedar, earth, and the faint scent of coffee still lingering from that morning. It smelled like home. Nayel. I hated that thought immediately. This was not home. It could never be. She would not let herself soften, not after everything she had endured. Freedom was her only goal. When the horse stopped at the porch, Elias dismounted first. "You can take the bed inside," he said. "I'll sleep in the barn." Nayeli stared at him, suspicious. "You think I will trust you?" Elias shrugged. "I don't expect you to. But you're free to take the bed anyway." She stepped down from the horse but stayed several feet away from him, her muscles tensed and ready to spring like a cornered wolf. "You said I am not your property," she said slowly. "So I can leave tonight." "You can," Elias replied simply. That startled her more than if he had said no. He didn't move toward her. He just loosened the saddle and brushed down the horse. "Road is dangerous at night," he added. "Wolves, snakes. Men too, but the choice is yours." Nayeli's jaw tightened. She wasn't afraid of the dark, nor of the land, but she was tired. Exhausted, even. Her legs trembled from walking. Her wrists still burned from the ropes, and her stomach was painfully empty. She stood at the edge of the porch steps for a long moment before pushing open the door to his house. The inside was simple: a small table, a few shelves, a fireplace. The bed was neatly made, the blankets clean. A folded shirt sat on the wooden chest beside it. Elias stood in the doorway but didn't enter. "There's food on the table. You can help yourself." "I won't owe you," she warned sharply. "You won't," he replied. He said it with such quiet certainty that she felt more off balance than ever. She approached the table slowly, staring at the still warm beans, the bread, the small piece of dried meat. Her stomach twisted painfully. She was starving. But she hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. "Why did you buy me?" she asked. Elias didn't answer right away. He walked to the doorway, leaned against the frame, and looked out at the darkening land. "You were about to be taken by someone cruel," he said simply. "Someone who would have hurt you. I couldn't let that happen." "You risked $2 for a stranger," she said, narrowing her eyes. "It's just money," he replied. Nayeli frowned. "You expect nothing from me?" He shook his head. "No work? No obedience?" She challenged. "You can work if you want to," he said. "Or leave if you want to. I won't force you either way." She bristled. Men always say one thing and then do another. Elias met her gaze then, and his eyes were calm, not demanding. "I don't." That irritated her more than anything. Because he seemed sincere. Because he didn't look at her the way the men at the auction had. Because he didn't threaten or coax or try. To earn her gratitude, he simply let her be. She finally tore a piece of bread and ate, her hands trembling slightly from hunger. Elias stepped outside afterward, shutting the door behind him to give her space. Nayeli looked around the house, every nerve alert. She checked the windows, the corners, the shadows. She had been betrayed before by smiles, by promises, by gentle words. She would not make that mistake again, but as night settled and quiet filled the small cabin, she realized something unsettling. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't afraid. Still, she didn't trust Elias. Not yet, perhaps not ever. But she did feel something else, a strange, cautious curiosity. Why would a man fight so hard not to control her? Why treat her with respect when he had every opportunity not to? Why give her freedom, even after paying for it? Later, when Elias returned briefly to bring her a blanket, Nayeli spoke before she could stop herself. "You said I can leave, but where would I go?" Elias hesitated. "If you want, I can take you to your people, or ride with you until you find a safe place." "Why?" she demanded again. He gave the same answer as before, quiet, honest, annoyingly calm. "Because it's the right thing to do." Nayeli did not respond. She simply pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders and stared into the fire. She didn't owe him trust. She didn't owe him gratitude, but she found herself wanting to understand him, and that, more than anything, scared her. The days that followed settled into a rhythm neither Nayeli nor Elias had expected. It was not peaceful, there was too much tension for that, but it was steady, structured, predictable. And after everything she had endured, predictability felt strangely unfamiliar to her. Each morning, the sun spilled over the ranch, soaking the land in warm gold. Roosters crowed. Wind stirred the grass. The smell of coffee drifted from the cabin's open window. Nayeli hated coffee, but she loved the scent of it. It meant morning. It meant she had made it through another night without being touched, ordered, threatened, or chained out. Elias was always up before dawn, working quietly. He didn't wake her, didn't demand chores, didn't expect her to make breakfast. He simply let her sleep, as though she were a guest, not someone he had paid $2 for. And that alone kept her wary. Kindness could be a cage, she had seen that before, but Elias didn't ask anything in return. He just worked. She watched him at first from a distance, keeping her arms crossed, her expression hard. He chopped wood, fixed fences, carried feed. Each movement was steady and efficient, and she realized very quickly that he wasn't trying to impress her. He didn't even know she was watching most of the time. One afternoon, as he mended a broken section of the corral, she finally spoke up. "If you want something from me, say it." He looked up, squinting against the sun. "I don't want anything," he said simply. "That's a lie." Her voice was sharp, shaped by years of betrayal. "No," he replied, tying another knot. "It's the truth." She scowled and walked away. She didn't understand him, and people she didn't understand were dangerous. That night, a storm rolled in. Lightning crackled across the sky, illuminating the ranch in ghostly blue flashes. Thunder boomed, shaking the walls. The roof creaked with the force of the wind. Nayeli stood at the single window, watching the storm with wide, alert eyes. Storms reminded her of the night her tribe was scattered. The night fires burned and screams carried into the darkness. Fear pressed against her chest now, unwelcome and humiliating. A soft knock came at the door. She spun, fists clenched. Elias stood there, rain dripping from his hat. He held a second blanket. "The roof leaks sometimes," he said. "If the water comes in, you can take the bed in the corner instead. It stays dry." Nayeli stiffened. "I don't want your bed." "I didn't offer mine," he replied gently. "Just the spare one." She glared at him for several long seconds, waiting for the trick. The catch. The shift. In his eyes that would reveal who he really was. But it didn't come. He simply set the blanket down on the chest and stepped back outside. Closing the door behind him, Nayeli's throat tightened in frustration. Why was he like this? Why did he keep proving himself decent? Why did he refuse to give her any reason to hate him? It made her uneasy, angry, even, because kindness was harder to fight than cruelty. The next morning, she found him limping slightly as he walked down the porch steps. She frowned and followed without thinking. "You're hurt. It'll pass. You should rest." Elias raised an eyebrow. "You giving orders now?" Nayeli flushed with irritation. "Someone has to. You act as if you're made of stone." He chuckled under his breath and kept walking. But she noticed the way he leaned heavier on his left leg. She saw the wince he tried to hide when he bent down to lift a bucket. Without announcing it, she reached for the second bucket. Elias blinked, surprised. "You don't have to." "I didn't ask your permission," she snapped. But her cheeks burned with heat because she knew she wasn't doing it from fear or obligation. She was doing it because he needed the help, because she wanted to, because he had done nothing but give her choice. And she couldn't ignore that forever. From that moment on, she began helping with chores. Not because she was told to, he never once told her what to do, but because she hated being idle. And because working gave her purpose again, strength again, identity again. She gathered eggs from the chicken coop, hauled water, fed the horses, swept the floors of the cabin with quick, practiced motions. She did everything with fierce intensity, even ordinary tasks, as if she were fighting for something unseen. Elias noticed, but never commented, never praised, never controlled. One day, when she brought him his tools without being asked, he studied her for a moment and said quietly, You don't have to prove anything to me. Her jaw flexed. I'm not proving anything. He nodded slowly. All right. But she felt the lie in her own chest. She was proving something not to him, but to herself. She was proving she was not broken. Despite the uneasy balance they'd found, tension still simmered between them. Nayeli's temper flared easily. Elias's patience stretched thin at times, though he rarely showed it. One morning, she startled one of the horses when she approached too quickly. The animal jerked, kicking the stall wall. Elias instinctively reached for her arm to pull her out of the way. Her reaction was immediate, pure instinct. Pure memory. She whirled, shoved him hard in the chest, and shouted, "Don't touch me!" Elias froze, hands raised, eyes wide with apology. I wasn't trying to. Don't lie. Don't pretend you're different from other men. Her breath came fast, too fast, her hands trembling. For a moment, Elias looked genuinely hurt, not offended, not angry, but wounded by the accusation. I'm not pretending, he said quietly. I grabbed you because the horse was about to kick. That's all. She hated the sincerity in his voice because it forced her to confront something she wasn't ready to face. He was different, and that made everything more complicated. After a long moment, Elias stepped back and said softly, I'll never touch you without permission. I need you to believe that. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her voice was locked behind her ribs. He returned to his work without another word, and she stood there, shaken, hating that a part of her wanted to believe him. That night, as she sat by the fire in the cabin, she found herself whispering into the silence, I don't understand you. Elias, who was outside tending the horses, couldn't hear her, but the fire crackled softly. As if it did, Nayeli hugged her knees to her chest. She was slowly learning two dangerous truths. This man did not want to break her. And that terrified her more than anything, because if he wasn't her enemy, she didn't know what to do with him. For nearly 2 weeks, the uneasy rhythm between Nayeli and Elias continued, neither harmony nor conflict, but something fragile and shifting in between. Nayeli still kept her distance emotionally, guarding her heart like a warrior protects the last arrow in a quiver. Elias kept his quiet patience, offering her space, safety, and choice. Every day, the line between them blurred just a little more. Even if neither dared acknowledge it, still, trust was a slow-growing seed. And Nayeli was not ready to let it sprout. But the world had a way of forcing change long before a person felt prepared for it. It happened on a morning where everything looked deceptively peaceful. The air was crisp. The sky stretched impossibly blue. Birds chattered in the nearby trees. Elias was out repairing a section of the fence that coyotes had damaged during the night. Nayeli carried a bucket to refill the water trough, the muscles in her arms tightening as she walked. She liked work, liked the clarity of it, liked the way her body felt strong and purposeful again. As she poured water into the trough, she noticed something on the horizon, a dark cluster of figures kicking up dust. Her instincts sharpened immediately. The bucket slipped from her hands and clattered onto the ground. Elias, she called, her voice tight. He was already standing, jaw clenched, eyes narrowed. He saw them too. 4 men on horseback, riding hard, dust boiling behind them, guns visible at their hips. Her stomach knotted. The men slowed as they approached the ranch. The lead rider, tall, lean, with a jagged scar cutting through his beard, wore a cruel grin that made Nayeli's skin crawl. She recognized that type instantly. The kind that smelled weakness. The kind that thrived on taking what wasn't theirs. The scarred man tipped his hat at Elias. Morning. Elias didn't return the gesture. What do you want, Marin? Marin. The name snapped into place in Nayeli's memory. She had seen those men before days ago when she was dragged into the settlement for the auction. One of them had tried to grab her chin and inspect her like livestock. Another had asked how much the wild-eyed girl might fetch. A cold shiver slid down her spine. Marin scanned the ranch, his eyes sliding over Elias before landing on Nayeli. His grin widened. Well, well. The girl from the block. Looks like someone beat us to her. Nayeli stiffened. Elias subtly stepped between her and the riders. She's not yours, Elias said. His voice was controlled, but his hand hovered near the gun at his hip. Marin chuckled. Not yours either, Turner. But I hear you paid a pretty penny. $2 for a girl who looks like she bites. His eyes darkened with amusement. We figured we'd come see if we could make you an offer. There's no deal, Elias said firmly. Marin shrugged. You sure? A girl like her fetches a fine price down south. Folks pay extra for exotic ones. Nayeli's jaw clenched. Heat flashed behind her eyes, fury, humiliation, disgust. Elias didn't move. Get off my land. The air went tense, sharp, electric. Marin's men shifted in their saddles, hands inching toward their holsters. The horses snorted nervously. Nayeli stepped forward before Elias could stop her. You think I am something to buy? She spat, her voice dripping venom. Try to take me and see what happens. Marin laughed a cold, delighted sound. The little wildcat speaks. Just like at the auction. Elias shot Nayeli a warning glance, but she ignored it. Her pride burned too fiercely. Marin leaned forward in his saddle. Here's the thing, Turner. We saw you buy her. That's fine. Your business. But we're short on money and a valuable piece of property like her. She's not property. Elias snapped. Marin raised an eyebrow. Then you won't mind handing her over. Elias's voice hardened to steel. I said no. Silence stretched. The type of silence that tasted like blood. Marin's smirk dissolved. We don't take kindly to being refused. Elias didn't flinch. Right away while you still can. For a moment, Nayeli thought bullets would fly. She braced herself, heart hammering. She had no weapon, no horse, no plan, but she would rather die fighting beside this strange, stubborn cowboy than let these men lay a hand on her again. Finally, Marin spat into the dirt. Fine, we'll leave today. He leaned forward, eyes burning into Elias's. But this ain't over. We'll be back. And next time, we won't ask. He jerked the reins, and the group turned, thundering away from the ranch. The moment they disappeared over the ridge, Elias released a slow breath. Nayeli didn't. She felt electrified, breathless. Trembling, furious at the men, furious at her past. Furious at the world that insisted on trying to take her freedom away, she turned on. Elias, you should have let me fight. You would have. Died, he replied calmly. I am not weak, she snapped. Never said you were. His voice was steady, but she could hear the tension threading through it. He had nearly drawn on 4 armed men. He had stood between her and danger without a second thought. Nayeli took a step closer, eyes blazing. You risked your life for me. Elias shook his head. I was protecting my land. That is a lie, she said sharply. You did it because of me. He looked at her, then really looked. And she saw it. The truth in his eyes. The thing he wouldn't say, you're under my protection, he said. For as long as you stay here. I didn't ask for your protection. I know. The wind rustled the grass around them. Somewhere far off, a hawk cried. Nayeli swallowed, throat tight. They'll come back. I know, Elias repeated. Then what will we do? We'll be ready. His calmness should have annoyed her, but it didn't. Not this time. Something inside her shifted, something small, trembling, but real, for the first time. She felt safer standing beside him than standing alone. She hated that dot, she needed it. She didn't understand it, but she did not walk away. Instead, for the first time, she stayed close. That night, they planned. They checked supplies, locked tools, reinforced gates. Nayeli inspected every corner of the cabin, every creak in the floorboards. Elias cleaned his rifle. She sharpened his hunting knife. They worked side by side, every movement quick and purposeful, not master and captive, not strangers, not yet allies, but something new. Something forming slowly, shaped by danger and choice. Later, when the lantern flickered low, Elias looked at her and said quietly, "They won't take you. Not while I'm alive." His certainty frightened her with its sincerity. She crossed her arms. "What if they come for you too?" He shrugged. "Then we fight." Nayeli exhaled, the tension in her shoulders softening. Just a little. "Then we fight." For the first time, she wasn't defying him. She was agreeing with him, and neither of them missed the significance of that fragile, powerful shift. Night fell heavy over the ranch. The sky was thick with clouds, the moon smothered behind them. The air felt too still, too sharp. Even the crickets were quiet, as if the land itself knew a storm was coming, not from the sky, but from the direction Marin and his men had gone. Inside the cabin, Nayeli paced like a caged animal, nerves taut as wire. Elias sat at the table, cleaning his gun with calm, deliberate motions. The lantern light flickered across his face, carving his features into angles of shadow and gold. "You should sleep," Elias said without looking up. "I can't," Nayeli snapped. He nodded. "Then sit. Save your strength." She didn't sit. She didn't want to. If she stopped moving, her thoughts would catch up to her, and she didn't want to face them, not yet. Hours stretched. The silence thickened. Then a sound broke it. Hoofbeats. Far away, but coming fast. Nayeli's heart lurched. Elias stood, gun in hand. Their eyes met in the dim light. "They're here." She moved to the window. A line of torches glowed on the horizon. 6, maybe 7 riders this time. More than before. More than they could handle. "They brought more men," Nayeli whispered. Elias didn't look surprised. "I expected that." The riders fanned out as they reached the ranch, surrounding the cabin like a tightening noose. Marin rode at the front, torch in one hand, revolver in the other. He called out, voice dripping with venom, "Turner, come out and hand over the girl, or we burn your pretty little home to the ground." Nayeli's breath hitched. Elias moved to the door, but she grabbed his arm. "You can't go out there. They'll kill you." "I'm not leaving you," he said simply. Her grip tightened. "You don't even know me. I know enough." His voice was steady, unbreakable. Nayeli's walls trembled, not from fear of the men outside, but from the truth in his words. A bang shook the cabin wall. Marin's men were striking the boards with rifle butts. A window cracked. Horses snorted in agitation. Elias took a breath. "We need a plan." Nayeli nodded. "The back window. We can get to the barn, take the horses." "They'll expect that," Elias said. Marin's smart enough to block the escape. She cursed under her breath. Marin shouted again, impatience turning to fury. "I'm losing my patience, Turner. Last chance." Elias leaned close to Nayeli. "You stay behind me, no matter what." "No," she hissed. "I can fight." "I know," he said, eyes steady on hers. "But if someone's getting shot first, it's me. Not you." Her chest tightened painfully. No one had ever said something like that to her. No one had ever meant it. "Elias," she whispered, voice unsteady, but he didn't let her speak. He moved to the door, gun ready. Before he stepped outside, he glanced back. "Stay low." He opened the door. The night exploded into motion. Marin fired first. Elias ducked behind the porch beam, returning a shot that clipped one rider's shoulder. Nayeli grabbed the second gun Elias had left for her and fired from the doorway, hitting a torch and sending it crashing into the dirt. "Get the girl!" Marin roared. Two men charged toward the cabin. Nayeli leaped back, reloading with frantic hands. Elias shot one of them in the leg, sending him crashing into the mud. Nayeli hit the second rider's horse, forcing the animal to buck and throw its rider. Torches lit the grass near the corral. Flames began licking the fence posts. Marin was trying to burn out their defenses and then smoke them out. "We have to move." Elias shouted. "Nayel." I nodded, sprinting to the table to grab the knife she had sharpened earlier. Flames cast wild shadows across the cabin walls. Elias covered her as she slipped out the back door. Bullets whizzed past, slicing the air like angry bees. She dove behind the water barrel, heart pounding. "Girl's running." A man yelled. "No, she's not," Nayeli muttered. She waited, counting footsteps, breaths, shadows, then lunged from behind the barrel and tackled the attacker with a hard, precise strike. The two of them hit the ground, rolling. She slammed the knife into the dirt beside his head, her fist connecting with his jaw. The man went limp. Elias shot another rider off his horse. Marin screamed curses, realizing the fight was turning. "Fall back," he shouted, rage crackling like wildfire. "Fall back, damn you." But Marin didn't flee. He rode straight toward Nayeli. Elias saw it. "Nayeli." She turned just as Marin reached her. He grabbed her wrist, yanking her hard against his saddle. "I told you, girl," he growled, breath rancid. "You're worth good money." Nayeli twisted, driving her elbow into his ribs. He grunted but didn't release her. Elias fired but couldn't hit without risking her. "Let her go." Elias roared. Marin laughed. "Make me." Nayeli's rage surged hot, wild, unstoppable. Everything she had ever endured burned through her veins like fire. "I said," she hissed. "I will not obey." She wrenched her arm free, leapt from the saddle, and dragged Marin down with her. They hit the ground hard. He reached for his gun. She kicked it out of his hand. He swung his fist. She ducked. Elias reached them first. He grabbed Marin and pinned him to the dirt with a force she didn't know he possessed. The fight ended in seconds. Marin's men, defeated, fled into the darkness. The ranch was safe. Smoke drifted from the scorched fence. Embers glowed in the grass. The night air crackled with the aftermath of violence. Elias stood slowly, chest heaving, hair wild from the struggle. "You all right?" he asked, voice low. Nayeli nodded, but the nod was a lie. Her legs trembled. Her breath shook. Fear and adrenaline pulsed through her like lightning. Elias stepped closer. "Nayeli, look at me." She lifted her eyes to his and something inside her, something she had locked away for years, broke open. Not in weakness. Not in surrender. But in truth. "You risked your life," she whispered. "For me." "I'd do it again," he said, voice steady despite the chaos around them. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't notice it until Elias gently pointed it out, not by touching her, but by softening his gaze in a way that made her throat tighten. "I'm not your owner," he said quietly. "I never was. You're free to go. Anytime." Nayeli stepped closer. "But you fought for me like I mattered." "You do," he said simply. She swallowed, struggling to find her voice. "I told you I wouldn't obey," she whispered. "I told you you'd regret buying me." Elias shook his head. "I don't regret it." For the first time, Nayeli took his hand, not because she had to, not because she owed him, but because she chose to. "You didn't buy me," she said softly. "You saved me." Elias squeezed her hand gently. "Then stay. Not because you're owned, but because you want to. Nayeli looked at the burning horizon, the ruined fence, the dirt soaked with the struggle for her freedom. Then she looked at Elias, the man who had never asked her for anything but had given her everything. "I'll stay," she whispered, voice trembling but true. For now. Her walls had not vanished, but they had cracked, and in the space between those cracks, something new had begun to grow, something fragile, something strong, something like trust, something like a future, something like love.